Paul is all the way here from Minneapolis, and he is going to be doing our workshop this afternoon, Storyboarding and Pre-Production Essentials. Paul is, if you read his resume, is quite extensive as well. He's been in the industry for nearly 30 years. He's an illustrator and author, comics, and he's going to be talking to you today about storyboarding your storylines and as far as just basically working to bring some structure and organization into your storyline. So without any further ado, please welcome Paul Fricke. This out of the way for you?
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm Paul Fricke. I've run my own business and been freelancing and self-employed since 1985. I've been telling stories and drawing since I was a little kid. And doing it professionally now for that long. I started my career, maybe if we could bring up the first image, Jim. I began my career, oh, not that one, hold on a second. There we are. I began my career in comics. When I was 12, I decided I wanted to draw for a living and do comics, and I was convinced that in 10 years, I was going to be drawing Spider-Man. Instead, I was writing, drawing, and self-publishing my own comic book called Trollords by the time I was 22 with my best buddy from high school. Trollords was three magical trolls that die in the first page of their first issue. And then they land back in their bodies with magical powers, having escaped death. So while there's a lot of Three Stooges-inspired slapstick in the stories, we also deal with topical issues. So it's not just all pie fights. This Christmas story we did way back when now actually has some sad moments in it. This is always one of my favorite and quintessential Trollords covers. This is when they biff. They wish themselves from one area to another, from one person to another. So like I said, they come back into their bodies with magical powers. We did Trollords for probably 6 years and did almost 30 issues for 3 or 4 publishers. And from there, I parlayed that kind of work into work for bigger companies like DC Comics, Topps, and other comics companies, First Comics in Chicago at the time. And I was an inker for The Fly and Amazing Man and Flash for a handful of years at DC in the early 90s. This is some work from the first issue, the black and this is scanned from the original art from the first issue. I inked this over Mike Parabeck, who also drew Batman Adventures around the same time, based on the stories based on the animated show that you might be familiar with. And here's like a superhero page, all fun. Comics for me at the time lost its luster because I had done exactly what I wanted to do with my own characters. And having to work for a big company doing stories that I was excited about but weren't my own, I was doing a lot of work for less money. And while I still loved comics, I wanted to move into other things. And that's when I started looking into work about 20 years ago, into work for storyboard work, illustration, and comic book work outside of the industry. So you can see, even though this storyboard frame, pretty much a key frame, and I'll explain that more in a second, I still got to draw superhero characters. This particular frame is for Best Buy when they were promoting and doing one of their commercials that had to do with the Spider-Man video game. So I was able to draw, I've been able to draw the last 20 years, a variety of well-known characters, like Transformers and such, for large companies. Best Buy, I did like 8 years of work storyboarding for their commercials, almost every commercial during that period. Burger King, many other companies. This is also a Burger King toy commercial that I worked on. I think Homer's supposed to be like a toy, and then inside the box, and the kid is shaking it, so he gets bounced all around the room. Ozzy Osbourne in a Best Buy store. Will Smith and family. This was for a Target thing, obviously. So I never knew, and I never know what a client is going to ask me to draw, and I have to be ready many times to draw anything. Some of you might be familiar with Monty Python, Monty Python's Flying Circus. John Cleese also played Q, I believe, in James Bond movies for a little while. For this particular project, for Best Buy, I drew a 2-inch stack of work over months, most of which was planning and concepting for commercials that were never made. So toward the end of the process, of the creative process and working through all the different concepts, they finally hit upon the right thing that was, that did the job that the marketers wanted it to do and what Best Buy wanted, something that John Cleese was comfortable with, and something that worked for the people who own the James Bond characters. So you can see here, this is some of the stuff that I thought was fun, drawing Cleese, testing out all these different gadgets, one after another in the James Bond world. A snappy suitcase, and a powerful fire-breathing umbrella. Again, I never know what they're going to ask me to draw, and comics turned out to be a perfect training ground for me to build all the skills that can be applied in many different ways. This is another Best Buy thing, a fantasy shot of a woman who is inside the store and then imagines herself on the rink. So how did comics train me for this kind of work? In any medium you're talking about, you need to tell the story as clearly and cleanly as you can. And for me, with comics, I had to think about composition, choice of shot, point of view, continuity, character design, and I had to be ready to draw anything. When you're drawing comics, you have to draw to your head a lot, you have to draw quickly, and I found that a lot of these skills, after doing this for 10 or so years, were directly applicable to doing storyboards. So I was working with agents at the time in the Twin Cities, and they recommended that I try doing storyboard work, and I was able to apply all that stuff that I learned in comics directly to another kind of work. This particular page is a comic book page for an autobiographical comic book that I did that is available for free online, bluemoontoons.com, Toons, called Spastic Chipmunk, about when I was 9 years old and stepped on a chipmunk. And apparently still feeling a lot of guilt over it now. But that's a 5-page story that you can read online. And you can see here, comics has an additional layer or element in that I also have to think about page composition and how the whole thing is flowing from panel to panel. That's one of the things that's different. With comics, I'm doing something complete and considering an entire page. And it's not fixed. I can lay the page out any way I'd like. So with storyboards, when you're preparing something for video or film or animation, you have a fixed frame. Also, for storyboard work, it's not anything anybody sees much of the time. A lot of times over the years I've been doing storyboard work and someone will ask, oh, so this drawing was on the screen? And I'm like, no, not really. It's not animated, I didn't put it up there. Almost all the concept work I do, other than using it for my own promotional purposes or showing here, doesn't usually get seen. It's behind the scenes kind of work. Another way I've been able to apply a lot of these skills has been doing comic books and comic strips outside of the comic book industry. This is for a educational comic strip that ran for 4 years for Blue Cross Blue Shield. This is for Focus on the Family, the Adventures in Odyssey Bible, where my wife and I did 32 full-color comics that were inserted inside a Bible for kids that sold untold tens of thousands of copies and was reprinted a few times. I've also been able to apply some of these, my love for comics, and I think they have great power in teaching and telling stories, for the National Kidney Foundation. In this regard, trying to get to people who may not have been diagnosed, so they can figure out how to treat, how to diagnose and then treat the disease and go through the process. Or for like the census, just a few years ago, the census was taken, and I did work here directly for them with repetitive images and text to make sure that everybody was going to apply. So there's lots of different ways that it can be, that these skills can be applied, and lately I've been doing that not only with illustration and comics, but with storyboard work. This is just an aside. It's kind of fun. I've also done a lot of work for Famous Dave. Do they have any restaurants, Famous Dave's around here? The barbecue places? So Dave hired me to do 200 illustrations for his life skills book. And this is like a self-help book, everything that Dave ever learned in life he wants to pass on to you. And when I first met him about this, he was worried. Everyone was telling him that he should have visuals in the work in order to relate to people, bring them in, add some humor to the process. And he was fighting it. And he said, I don't want to talk down to the audience because this is serious material. He took it very seriously. And I said, well, I believe in the power of visuals and merging text and illustration into any kind of project. And if you're thinking it's talking down to people, then I'm probably not your guy. And he sighed and paused a little bit and went, okay, let's do it. So that was a big job, but I had to be willing and confident to let the job go, because I do believe in this. It's what I do for a living. I have a job in large part, oh, by the way, to finish that off, this is one of those serious illustrations that Dave wanted me to do. For most of the text, I went through this big book and I concepted every single illustration I could think of, and then he would say, yeah, go ahead with that, take this one out. But this was his idea, and it was about a chapter where you had to have, a healthy digestive system. And he titled the chapter something about having foot-long fluffy floaters. So this is the illustration he came up with. And when he saw it, he's like, all right, that's it. That's perfect. Just what I wanted. So very serious topics in Dave's book. That's pretty much my reaction to having drawn that. So in all of these kinds of media, in different mediums, we need to tell the story as simply and cleanly and honestly as we can. And what are the basics of how we go about that? A lot of I teach currently at comics at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. And one of the things we talk about on a regular basis is the language of comics. And a lot of times when we're discussing it, we're using film terms like angle and shot and point of view and zoom and all that close up, all those things. So even though they are distinct in different mediums, they have some things in common. In the mid-30s, a young Orson Welles had already conquered the stage. He had, in New York, had put out some very, and directed some very avant-garde and cutting-edge Shakespeare and other plays. While at the same time, he was the voice of the shadow and had conquered radio. And he also had his own Mercury Theater, a troupe of people who would act with him, voice act for the radio, or on stage. And then he had this he did this big thing called The War of the Worlds. It was an adaptation of the H.G. Wells novel from a previous century. And the way he adapted it was to make the play, make what was happening in the story as if it were really happening. So a lot of people who tuned in, again in the mid-30s, 38, 39 I think, thought it was real. They thought aliens were actually coming, and suddenly it was a big thing. And he was like an overnight success, and he had to apologize the next day, and so on and so forth. So he was not only already a talented wunderkind, he was not already quite accomplished in his young, early 20s. Then RKO Studios offered him a huge contract to direct his own movies. And a lot of directors who had paid their dues and had been directing for 20-something years were not happy about it. And what he said about the RKO contract was that they had given him the best big toy train set a boy could ever have. And suddenly he had this whole new thing to play with, a medium which he really didn't get. He understood story, he understood sound, he understood staging and blocking, but he didn't really understand the visual language of film or visual storytelling. One of his early endeavors here, which was aborted, was to adapt Joseph Conrad's Hearts of Darkness or Heart of Darkness. And he was going to do that completely with point of view, first person. So everything was going to be seen from the eye equals the eye, and it wasn't workable. An intriguing concept. It actually was done later by Robert Montgomery, I believe, Elizabeth Montgomery's dad, directed Lady in the Lake from a Raymond Chandler novel, and it's not good. So sometimes that POV can work for certain things, and other times not so much. So I'm glad he aborted that. Years later, Heart of Darkness was adapted on film, 35 years later, by Francis Ford Coppola as Apocalypse Now. So that movie did get made at some point. But here, he went on from that aborted project to another, and then finally to Citizen Kane, what became Citizen Kane. Again, he had no idea, really, what the language of film was. So he asked the people, he had a good group of people around him at RKO, and asked them, give me the basics. And they provided him a series of still shots from other movies that showed him exactly what the basics were and how to tell a story visually. They would give him a little shot from a long point of view of a house, establishment shot, long shot. They'd give him a medium shot. They'd give him a close-up. They told him about fades and dissolves and montages and all these things. And what he did with that toy train set was quite remarkable. I wouldn't mind right now showing you a few minutes, the first about 3 minutes of the opening scene of Citizen Kane, to give you an idea of how he stuck with those basics, but also brought to it a lot of style. Just a quick question. Has anyone not seen Citizen Kane before? Oh my God. All right, so make sure you go out having gotten a little taste and watch the rest as soon as you can. All right, I'm going to show more images, Jim. So what did Orson Welles do with that first sequence? I'll show you in a second. That's the wrong one. He starts off with a scene of that, a close-up of that fence with no trespassing. So immediately you're getting a lot of information that you're out, you're left out. But as a voyeur of film, as a watcher of film, as a viewer, you're able to move into and past the barriers that the visual information is giving you. So I'll just talk about that a little bit. No trespassing. He's saying don't enter, so you know someone's blocking you out. You go into another series of fences and gates, getting more and more difficult to get past until you get to that shot of the large gate with the K on it, so you know it's Kane, and you know it's a castle in the distance, and so on. Now this is a long shot, an establishing shot. Now this doesn't have to be the first shot whenever you tell a story. It can be, you can start with a close-up and then move out, just as long as you do it soon enough that people know where the characters are, where they are in terms of proportion and proximity. So you need to have some kind of establishing shot fairly early on so the characters can move within that. Take a look at the castle here. It almost looks like a horror film. And look in the background where that window is. In every shot, as we move slightly closer to the castle, the window is in the same exact spot, even when it's in a reflection here. It's in the same spot as we move closer and closer. So there's a visual continuity, and that window becomes very important and a focus, even though it's not centered in the frame. It is the center of interest. And you can see here, he's giving you tons of information about what this castle's like, what's happening with it. Here's a dilapidated golf course. So you're getting an idea that there's opulence, but things are unkempt. And now we're getting even closer, moving into a middle shot, a mid shot, and seeing that window in the same spot. Now we're into a close-up of the window, and then the lights go out. When the lights come back on, we've done a 180, and now we're inside the room with the window in the exact same spot. Now here's a real close-up. It's a little house within a snow globe, and it's still another close-up. A lot of times with the long shot, that's getting a sense of mood and tone, time and place. And with the medium shot, you're going to see either an object or an action, or you're going to see a person or a character moving within that space. With close-ups, you're either going to see an action or some kind of expression or emotion. And so be wary of those, be cognizant of those as you're working on your film projects or any kind of creative stuff. You want to be able to use those tools at the exact right time that you'd like. Another close-up of the rosebud whisper. He drops the globe, it breaks, and this is like a close-up and some kind of funhouse mirror shot with a reflection in the glass, and the nurse coming in, and then finally the last shot with the sheet being pulled over. So you can see there's a lot of things where in this opening sequence, where Wells is covering all the bases with the basics, but he's also augmenting those and doing it with a lot of style and panache and bringing a lot to it. In fact, he ended up kind of writing the visual language of film that, you know, kind of kept in place for the last 60 years. Also inspired Will Eisner, who did comics in the 40s with The Spirit and then beyond. Alex Toth, my favorite comics artist, who also designed in Space Ghost and did a lot of animation design and storytelling, laying the groundwork for Batman Adventures and many other things to come. Without Wells and without Kane, I'm not sure those things and all those different mediums would have developed the same way. Now, where do you get your inspiration? For me, many times when I'm not working on a personal project, it's what the client wants me to do. And in this case, I think, you know, this guy, this artist, is eating some Hormel food and spills some on the canvas. Not blink anymore, so he's got some kind of breakthrough. These are the things I keep in mind while I'm drawing, thinking about those basics. Like I said already, establish the setting, let the people know where you're at and where the characters are. Establish the characters within those settings. What are the different actions? Whatever's happening in your story, you want to make that, you know, clear and concise and get the point across. We saw it in some of the student films already here. The action was brought across very clearly. Objects. In my case, for commercial work, it's a lot of product and people with product. Continuity again. This is a matter of keeping the characters on model and consistent. Someone spoke here earlier about making sure everyone was dressed the same way, day in, day out for the shoot. So you have to keep that kind of thing in mind, regardless of the medium you're working in. Composition, you saw a lot of interesting compositions in that first little bit of Kane. And in a short while, I'm going to call up 1 or 2 volunteers to do some storyboard drawing with me. So get geared up for that, and then we'll see how composition works from your point of view. Point of view is easy. It's the POV. It can be first person. It can be a bird's eye view, a worm's eye view. You can move the camera around, so-called. And then you want to add variety to those shots to keep interest as much as possible. You don't want to end up with film or comics or anything with talking heads, which is where the man got the name, of just there's a head, there's talking, there's people back and forth. Add some interest to it. No matter what you're doing, you want to keep things simple, make it so simple you can't cheat, and add some of your own unique spin to it. Add some style, but no matter what you're doing, you're trying to communicate your ideas with clarity. Keep it as clear as possible, because when you're telling a story, if you've lost them on some technical thing, or if the viewer or the reader is unsure about where they're supposed to go next or what happened on the screen, you've lost them, you've confused them, and they're out of the story. So it's imperative that you tell the story as clearly as possible. It's really job one. Here's some cases in point of jobs I've worked on. Now you can see these drawings are very, very simple. I had to do about 35 drawings in 4 hours for this client. So in this particular instance, with this job, it was a commercial that was going to take place at like a night drugstore and then Target Field in Minneapolis. So I was called in to meet with the director, who was flown in from California and got the job, to work up these storyboards. Now these are shooting boards, so they're probably 3 inches wide, maybe 3 or 4 inches wide, very teeny, and I had to draw them very quickly in a very short period of time. But what they were for is a visual tool for the director on set to know what was going to happen, to get it clear in his mind and have a plan, as well as communicating to the people in his crew what shot he wants. He doesn't have to explain anything. He did all that with me. I adapted that, I translated that visually. So he has a plan, a visual plan, to tell everybody, now I want this kind of shot, now I want that kind of shot. So he had some reference shots that he had done on location and gave to me that I could use as a basis for these, and then had to draw these very quickly. So let's see, 4 hours. Like, how much is that, 9 per hour? So that's moving very fast. I wish I had a couple more hours to do this once he saw them, but the job was done. So there's only, sometimes with this kind of work, and you should keep this in mind as you're, building any kind of storyboard or plan for your work, is that it doesn't have to be the greatest looking stuff in the world. You don't even have to be able to draw. It's far more important to think about the storytelling, choice of shots, and making sure things are clear. My drawing is not the greatest here, but it's getting the job done and communicating things clearly for the director on set as the characters are moving through. From the drugstore, inside the car, he's putting the blindfold on, and this is the previous manager of the twins who's moving this guy to target field and then through the basement and other areas. And finally to a special area where ex-twins and other contest winners are congregating. Now, a lot of these shots didn't end up in the final, it's like a 15 or 20 second spot, maybe 30 seconds tops. So you can see a lot of work goes into this from the director, and he has me draw shots that may not be in the plan, but it gives them a guide for something they can do while they're shooting on set. Some of the drawings I have to do are in pencil very quickly. All those ones I just showed you are actually drawn digitally. So many of the drawings I've done have been old school, pen and paper or marker, and then scanned in if I need to deliver them digitally. The last 7 years I've been doing almost all my storyboards and comps on a Cintiq at home drawing on the screen. And I'm able to go faster, and then the client doesn't really mind because I'm delivering something to them quicker. As long as they can read it, it's fine with them. Sometimes I'll have to draw stuff in ink or marker. This was still drawn the old-fashioned way. But what are we talking about in terms of story here on this one? This is a hefty commercial. So we see it open up in space with an alien and astronauts and so on. You go down to the next shot on the lower left, and more of a mid-range shot, and you see that action. And then we cut to the upper right and seeing this lady pop up on the moon next to him, or whatever planet it is. And then we find out it's more of a fantasy for this guy, and he's just acting things out to make taking out the trash more interesting. In any case, I had to make sure that the characters were, how they wanted them to look, and I had to make sure that the story was told clearly. So they had, in a lot of cases, I found that a lot of people don't think visually. I bet you most of you do. And it took me a long time working in comics and in storyboards to realize that most people don't. They can't think and communicate visually. So part of why I have a job, a big part of it, is because of that fact. So if an art director has a concept or a series of concepts, it's really hard to go in and describe that to the higher-ups who are calling the shots and making the decisions and have other things in mind. And with these drawings, they can sell that concept, explain it to them a lot easier and a lot quicker, and that's a big part of why I do what I do. This is a series of shots I did for a client actually here in town, one of the sponsors, Agency Meibu. And you got to see here, I drew a lot of different Honda vehicles. A lot of fun to do those, actually. Again, storytelling. Long shot for this Best Buy commercial, seeing the store, and then them inside the store, what they're doing in the store, and then at home as well, and showing the gift card at the end. All of these are key points in terms of getting the story across and making things clear to the reader. This is an exploration of different shots for a Blue Cross Blue Shield storyboard. And you can see here, the mood is different. I did these with tone, and I'm trying to get across a different feeling for these people who are packing up to move, or they're leaving and they're building something with their grandson. All the memories and so on and so forth. So this has a different feel and vibe than some of the other pieces I do, and you got to keep that in mind as you're drawing away. You can see here the cropping, I'm trying to keep the cropping interesting as well. In the top part, the man's face is not the focal point, it's the card that he's holding, or the woman's face is partially obscured because she's holding the card. Or the moving in the panel just below that, we're talking about the moving as being the main action, and that's carrying the story at that point. We don't need to see everyone's face and every shot perfectly centered. In every case, you're talking here about getting ideas across, using whatever you'd like to, and in this case, start moving into some color. Airborne, I got to draw this goofy cartoon airborne guy. This one is always fun. Fiber One, maybe? Fiber Choice? Can't recall. Has something to do with filling the hole with whatever the information is. That's a fun one to do. All right, now, I'm going to ask a couple of you to come up in a short while, but these are the kinds of things I'd like you to keep in mind as you are going to be interpreting what we're going to be drawing. So what do I ask clients? And this, I think, is what you ask yourself, or if you're doing drawings for someone else as you're developing a project, these are the things to keep in mind that I ask every single time. What are the boards for? You know, how long are they going to take to do? And when do you need them? What do you need them in? Pencil, line, tone, or color? And then what's the size or format? I really need to know that going in, because I don't want to be drawing a 4x3 template when they want a widescreen frame. So those are the kinds of basics that I ask. And a lot of times the art directors will already have that in mind, or in your case, the movie makers or a friend who you're working on the project with. And if you're doing it for yourself, you want to keep that in mind as well. What exactly is the format? And the size too. A lot of times for these kinds of boards, you can work really small. If you start working really big, you're going to put in too much information. These don't have to be beautiful finished drawings. Work with a nice thick line pencil or marker and do it quickly as a guide for you. And if you do a drawing that doesn't fit anymore, you can toss that out and move something else in its place. The main thing is to quickly draw these things as a guide or a plan for what you need to do. Always ask the age of the characters, what the gender of the characters is, what the ethnicity is. Keep those things in mind as you're casting, as you're developing your story, and clothing. A lot of times I'm asking questions of the art directors that they haven't thought of yet, but usually they're thankful that I'm asking them, because marketers and other people, they even have a certain idea of what that final storyboard should look like and what the final spot will look like. I ask them about the tone of the piece and what the style is, and what the time of day in the piece is. That's part of establishing the setting as well. Got it. So instead of looking at more of these samples, I think what I'd like to do is see if somebody would like to come up and do some drawing with me. All right, you got your hand up first, let's go. So this is hi, I'm Paul.
Hi, Hannah.
Hannah, nice to meet you. So this is yours.
Okay.
Have you drawn with iPad before?
Kind of.
All right, have a seat. And then I've got one of these for you, a stylus. Let's check your size of your, that's too thick. That's good. That's not what we want. Something like that should do you. All right, so for this first one, now try not to look at what I'm drawing.
Okay.
And I'll try not to look at what you're drawing. Okay. And we'll see how we both decide to tell this story. In this scenario, it might be one you're kind of familiar with. So let's try 2 robots are in a spaceship and being jettisoned from their spaceship.
Okay.
And then they're hurtling through space, and then they land on a sand planet. Does this sound familiar yet? So those are the 3 shots we should try.
Okay.
So if we have our drawing here, just do a box like so. Split that into 3 horizontally like so. And those are your 3 shots for your first 3 drawings.
Okay.
So you can fill those drawings, fill that space however you'd like.
Wow, yours is much nicer.
With storyboards, it almost doesn't matter how nice the drawing is. I'm drawing with my finger here. I'm not going to look at what you're doing. Let's see what we both come up with. I'll just keep talking through the scenario again. So, spaceship. With robots or something being jettisoned from it in a pod of some sort. And I like to use different sizes and such if I want to fill in black, so you can do that if you'd like. And you can go at a different pace. If you're already on drawing 3, that's fine with me.
No.
I like to add oh, that's too big.
How many robots?
2. Stars. And then the second shot, you know, the robots are going through space. And that can be any kind of shot you'd like, right? So that can be a shot of a ship going through space. It could be more of a close-up. It could be many different types that you'd want to try. And then I'm going to start the third shot here of, this is landing, right?
In sand desert?
Yeah, landing on a big sand planet, let's say. I don't know where I came up with that. No idea. There we go. So now we can look. So they're hurtling through space in yours there. All the same exact stuff. We're going from the same kind of information, same input, same direction. And you can see, sitting side by side, we came up with completely different ways to tell the story. And, you know, focusing on different things. Mine's focusing on action and drama, especially in the first and last shot. In your first shot, you're showing the characters within the spaceship, right?
Yeah.
What are they doing in the second one? Are they just hurtling through space in nothing? They're just kind of...
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Zooming through
they can
nothing.
breathe. They don't have to breathe in space, right? So they didn't
robots.
have... Yeah, they didn't have to be in a spaceship or any kind. And then, you know, I've got some comic relief, sort of, in the middle shot by switching the point of view to have them upside down and hurtling through, and they're a little disoriented. And your comic relief, you know, is there in the second one, but it's also there in the third one, showing the aftermath of the crash rather than the actual moment of impact. So nicely done, Hannah. Thanks for joining me up here. Thank you. All right. I need someone else to come up here, too. Anyone else want to draw? There we go. I'll get this set up for the next one. All right. Your name is? Naji.
Yep.
Nice to see you. I'm Paul. This is your tool here, and there's your deal. Let's have a seat over here and see what we come up with next. All right, so in this scenario, it's something we just came up with during lunch. Someone suggested this to me. So you got the whole screen. Hit that one again up there. There you go. Now you got the whole screen. You see where your edge of your page is? Mm-hmm. All right, so let's try this one. Or we want 3 shots. First shot is a long shot where people are, 2 people are shoveling snow. Second shot is a close-up of somebody, of one of the shovelers, really intensely into the work. All right? And then the third shot is a medium shot with one of the people shoveling a lot and another one completely covered by snow.
Right.
All right? So don't look at mine, I won't look at yours, and we'll see what we come up with. First, draw your, get a good size there, you're good. So draw your box like she did earlier. What happened to my wrong color? All right. I like to whistle while I work too. Yeah. Long shot. Make sure you're establishing snow and people and all that stuff. Some of my best work. I don't even know what's going on there. That's the wrong one. You guys are what? Disjointed? That's all right. They don't have to be anatomically correct for the purposes of storyboard. Mine aren't. I mean, don't look, but mine are probably worse than yours. All right. I snuck a peek. I'm peeking. I can't be peeking. That's really thick. Are you clear on the last shot? I mean, you know what's supposed to happen, right?
He's sweating because he's working so hard.
He's sweating, he says, because he's working so hard. And really, when you're doing storyboards, sweat is the most important thing you can draw. All right, I'm getting done. Are you close? So even while you're drawing, I'm going to talk about the first ones. So you see, what he's drawn in the first shot is a stable, solid, establishing shot, pretty much from point of view of someone standing, and looking straight on. It's not unclear at all what's going on in that shot. My shot is kind of like 3/4 overhead. Tough to see what's going on here, but if you know what you're looking at, it's enough for me to go on for what I want. Our middle shots aren't too dissimilar, right? You got the close-up, the cropping is similar, almost exactly the same kind of shot, slightly different cropping. And then I actually like your last one better. It's more clear in terms of the snow, very funny, punchline for the last one. I added a little bit more with the action of the shoveler, just showing that maybe the shoveler is not paying attention as they're doing this. But the punchline is the same, and your storytelling there is very clear.
Thank you.
So thanks for coming up, and nicely done.
I prefer to stick to this pencil. It's a little easier to manage.
You're right. Just one more thing to clear up, and then we're done. So thanks for coming up and doing that. So that's a nice illustration of what you have to do when you're drawing storyboards. A lot of times I have to think on my feet. I've got to think quickly. I've got to draw fast. Obviously at home I'll take a little more time drawing, but only a little more in getting the idea across for clients. I just wanted to finish with something personal, actually. In last year around this time, my dad was, can we get that up? Last year at this time, my dad was diagnosed with lung cancer. He was 82. And I find that not only can I take those skills that I've built up to do work and get paying jobs and for my own personal projects, but even when we're telling a story clearly, it's meant to communicate. You want to communicate something honest and true and clear to somebody. In my case, my dad, all the other things they tried to do for him were not going to work, and it was a long shot to begin with. And by late November last year, it was pretty clear, it was very clear that he wasn't going to make it. And he had a do not resuscitate on his wrist, the tag. And on Saturday, he was checked into a hospice on Friday, and on Saturday, we got to Skype with him. He was clear. He was succinct. He knew exactly what was going on. He laid it all out for us. 2 days later, none of us could talk to him. I was in another state. I was in Minneapolis, and I couldn't get down to Texas to see him. We had taken a trip, my family and I, to visit with him in June, to be there to help him and my mom while he was here, rather than worrying about a funeral later or anything like that. But it was a very helpless feeling to not be able to communicate and talk with him on the phone. And a lot of this stuff that I drew in a comic really quick was stuff I'd already said to him, but I still felt I needed to connect with him in some fashion. So I took about an hour to draw each of these pages that tried to get across to him what he meant to me and everything he did for me in regards to supporting what me and my siblings wanted to do. And a lot of us, whether it's with music or working with wood or construction or what I'm doing, drawing for a living, were because of what my mom and dad did to support us. I took little moments from my point of view and what I could remember and tried to get those across to whoever wanted to read it and to my dad. And he did not read a lot of my comics when he was around. He supported me in many other ways, but he wasn't paging through and reading every issue of Troll Lords I ever drew. Just wasn't his thing. But he read this one. I finished it on Tuesday in a couple hours. By Thursday, my sister had been able to read it to him and show him, and he did read this comic I drew just for him. It's a very immediate thing, drawing like this. It's a very honest and quick thing, visceral, that can get through to people. And regardless of whether you are drawing for a job or trying to communicate something for a world at large, or drawing something for, those closest to you, keep these kinds of things when you're telling stories. Be clear and concise, communicate clearly and with a lot of passion, and be honest and true in what you're getting across, whether it's to those closest to you or the world at large. Thanks for taking time today, and thanks for having me here.
Paul. Thank you, Paul.
View this program again at freetv.org, on Community Access Channel 12, or order a copy, info@freetv.org or 258-8767.